This brief segment focuses on Mexico. The goal of this presentation is to inform you on various aspects of that country in preparation for your upcoming investment decision. There are many aspects of a country that may be relevant to potential investment decisions, and the various languages of a country is the first of such issues. Similarities and/or differences in languages can have a substantial impact on a firm's ability to communicate with local customers, suppliers, and even employees. While Spanish, the dominant language of Mexico, and Portuguese are clearly distinct languages, they both originate from the same Italo-Western subgroup of languages and share many common words and idioms. Nevertheless, there are a considerable number of differences between the two languages. Indeed, in various aspects, the system of sounds in Portuguese is more similar to Catalan or French than, say, those of Spanish. Moreover, both countries are virtually unilingual. A second issue which can influence a firm's ability to conduct business in a foreign country is the dominant religion. Religion has a potentially powerful impact on people's value systems and can influence how they behave and interact with one another. In terms of religious affiliation, it would be difficult to find more similar countries than Brazil and Mexico. In both countries, more than 90% of the population claims an affiliation with Roman Catholicism, as has been the case for more than 4 centuries. Nevertheless, while the religious similarities between Brazil and Mexico are undeniable, there are also some substantial differences as well. Within Brazil, the proportion of people claiming the religion is very important in their lives, 77%, is the second highest in Latin America, whereas Mexico has the second lowest percentage, at 57%. A third factor which may influence a company's ability to conduct business in a foreign country is the level of industrial development. This not only influences the cost of labor in a country and the consumption patterns, but it also arguably shapes the attitudes, values, and behaviors of the population in general. In terms of the level of economic and industrial development, Brazil and Mexico are very similar to each other. This holds true whether you measure the level of economic development by the prominence of the service sector or by the degree of urbanization. However, despite these obvious similarities, there are also some substantial differences between Brazil and Mexico. Most notably among these differences are Mexico's much higher GDP per capita, almost 60% higher in Mexico, and a higher level of motor vehicle ownership, almost 80% higher. A fourth important issue is the similarities and/or differences in the educational systems of countries. In both Brazil and Mexico, education is regulated by the government and is divided into public and private sectors. The public sector is typically inferior to the private system in both countries. Yet, despite these similarities, there are also a number of differences between Brazil and Mexico. For example, Brazilian students tend to be better prepared than Mexican students after completing their basic education. However, in contrast, the graduate programs in Mexico are considered to be higher quality than those in Brazil. A fifth critical issue with respect to doing business in another country is similarities and/or differences in the legal and political systems. Mexico's governmental system, like Brazil's, maintains and functions with the division of power and authority amongst the 3 branches, executive, legislative, and judicial. Similarly, in both countries, there are federal and state constitutions. The executive and legislative heads are elected by popular vote, and both countries follow a presidential system of government with pluralism, i.e. several political parties. Nevertheless, there are also a number of differences between the countries. For example, the legal system in Mexico provides for federal and state laws, whereas in Brazil, the judicial system is based on the code of law and does not make the same distinction. Also, unlike Brazil, the Mexican states have more political power. A sixth but potentially more subtle issue is similarities and/or differences in actual business practices. This can involve simple but potentially embarrassing issues such as how to properly greet people and attitudes towards time. Brazil and Mexico have remarkably similar business practices in many aspects. In both countries, relationships are paramount. The trust between business partners is built up over multiple visits and often includes eating together. Mexico also shares with Brazil a similarly relaxed attitude about time. Essentially, people and relationships are considered more important than schedules. Nevertheless, there are also some differences in business practices the Brazilians should be aware of when doing business in Mexico. Business dress in Mexico is more conservative, and there's less emphasis on style and fashion. Conversation tends to be more reserved as well, and less personal than in Brazil. Mexicans also have a tendency to avoid saying no, instead saying maybe, or we'll see. The seventh and final issue is the broader set of cultural values which are commonly shared by a large portion of a country's population. Countries can vary in terms of the emphasis placed on individuality versus conformity, the attitudes towards uncertainty and ambiguity, the attitudes towards authority and social inequities, and not least, attitudes towards how gender roles are allocated in society. Culture is another area of similarity between Brazil and Mexico. In both countries, people tend to be more group-oriented, rather than focusing on the individual. Similarly, ambiguity and uncertainty tend to be avoided by both cultures. However, regarding gender roles, Mexico tends to be more traditional and masculine than Brazilian culture, and authority and respect for that authority are more culturally significant in Mexico. This concludes our brief presentation on Mexico.